Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekanandasure Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we resume this discussion on Swami Vivekananda's God in Everything, one of the Jnana-Yoga lectures. And we are coming towards the end of this lecture. And if you read Swamiji's lectures, Swami Vivekananda's lectures, they all start off by preparing the ground, and there is a logical discourse, a philosophical discourse. But then the closer it approaches to the culmination, it's like a wave of music ending in a crescendo. So it starts culminating. I mean, while it starts with philosophy and logical, precise analysis, towards the end it becomes almost poetic. I mean, well, not almost, sheer poetry. So here, and that's as it should be. I mean, in fact, the authors of the Upanishads, those who saw these mantras, they were referred to as kavis. Yeah? So basically, Krantadarshi. So those who had insight. And here, this particular lecture, God in Everything, the underlying theme is basically what is exposed and discussed in fairly great detail in this little Upanishad, short but very important Upanishad, the Ishavasya Upanishad or the Ishopanishad, which starts with Ishavasyam idam sarvam, which we have talked about here. And the whole lecture has really been an exposition of that particular Upanishad. And as he comes to the end, because he has laid the groundwork, here, towards the end, he essentially sheds all the details, the ratiocinations, and essentially gives you the conclusions in its purest form. So, where were we before we resume today? And it's basically, he had said, I mean, this was the doubt he had raised, that look, there are these great thoughts and great ideas that we come up with, but then when the moment of test comes, we are sometimes found wanting. And so what's the solution? What is the practical solution to the fact that our ideas and ideals carry on in one way, but then our practice often does not measure up? And this is something that we all experience in our subjective lives. Theoretical ideals are all very fine, and we try to bring them into practice, but often not in full measure, sometimes fail. So what do we do about it? And he basically says that the solution to that really is to keep on repeating. Why? Because essentially what is happening is that there is a certain habit, certain force of habit that carries us forth in a particular direction. And the ideals are basically telling us that one should practice in a different way, which means that new habits need to be cultivated. And if new habits need to be cultivated, then new habits of thought need to be cultivated. Yeah? And so that's why he's basically giving the solution in what in Sanskrit is called Shravan Manan Nididhyasana. Yeah? So hear about it, think about it, and then hold on to that conclusion. So if one has not heard of these higher things, higher thoughts, then there has not been any input into our minds. Yeah? So that's going to be, if it's not there, if there is no input, then there is nothing to guide our actions by, right? So that's the importance of hearing about these things. But just mere hearing only affects us for the time being very superficially. And therefore, the next step, manana or analysis or thinking about it, essentially to make these ideas our own. This is still at a mental level or at the level of intellect, but essentially what is happening is that the faculty to feel gets combined with the faculty to ratiocinate or reason, which means reason leads to this feeling that what we are thinking about is true. Yeah. Otherwise, just a logical manipulation does not give rise to this subjective feeling, yes, this is true for me. So what's the output of this ratiocination, manana? It's basically to make that which we have heard about something that we accept at the level of feeling also to be true. That's the second step. This nididhyasana is essentially holding on to this conviction by the strength of our will, which means being able to have the strength to not just think and feel these things to be true, but also to carry it out in practice. This third faculty is what is called willing. Yeah. So essentially, there's the rational aspect of the mind, which is what hears and then analyzes and then converts it into a combination of reasoned feeling. Yeah? Which means basically our spurious emotions are removed and a clear truth-based feeling is developed. And finally, that is carried out in practice. So when Vedanta talks of this faculty called buddhi, what one is really referring to is this combination of these three faculties: thinking, feeling, and willing. Yeah. And so it is important to keep on thinking these higher ideas and analyzing them and trying to convert them into something that is true for oneself. And even if one is not measuring up to it in some practice, one keeps trying, which means the will starts getting removed or detached from earlier habits and being trained in new ones. That's the solution that is given, which means essentially it's like a spring that has been coiled in one particular direction. You want to coil that spring in a different direction so that your instinctive reaction in terms of actions becomes something that is in accordance with our higher thoughts, with our higher ideals. So that was where we had stopped last time, which is essentially dealing with this problem, dealing with this practical problem, that in practice, what we do, the way we act, sometimes does not quite measure up to what we know to be true, what we know to be higher. And therefore, think, and this is what, in this Jnana-Yoga, this analytical style of practice, this holding on to a conviction as true is what takes the place of meditation. Yeah? So it's basically this pratyaya, which is called nididhyasana. So dhyana or upasana is an object-oriented meditation, but nididhyasana is essentially the output, holding on to the conviction that is an output of a process of enquiry. That's the slight difference in connotation between dhyana or meditation on the one hand, which is what is advised in the Yoga Sutras, for instance, and nididhyasana as it is described in Vedanta, Uttarmimamsa. Okay. And so he goes on with the importance of this thinking. It is thought which is the propelling force in us. Fill the mind with the highest thoughts, hear them day after day, think them month after month. Never mind failures, they are quite natural. They are the beauty of life, these failures. What would be life without them? It would not be worth having if it were not for struggles. Where would be the poetry of life? Never mind the struggles, the mistakes. I never heard a cow tell a lie, but it is only a cow, never a man. So never mind these failures, these little backslidings. Hold the ideal 1,000 times, and if you fail 1,000 times, make the attempt once more. The ideal of man is to see God in everything. But if you cannot see Him in everything, see Him in one thing, in that thing which you like best, and then see Him in another. So on you can go. There is infinite life before the soul. Take your time and you will achieve your end. So here he summarizes this resolution of this problem that we just now discussed. And at this stage, there is a kind of a change of gear. He moves, he basically quotes freely from the Ishopanishad. He, the one who vibrates more quickly than the mind, who attains to more speed than mind can ever do, whom even the gods reach not, nor thought grasps, he moving, everything moves. In him all exists. He is interpenetrating everything. He is moving, he is also immovable, he is near and he is far. He is inside everything, he is outside everything, interpenetrating everything. Whoever sees in every being that same Atman, and whoever sees everything in that Atman, he never goes far from that Atman. When all life and the whole universe are seen in this Atman, then alone man has attained the secret. There is no more delusion for him. Where is any more misery for him who sees this oneness in the universe? So this paragraph was in quotes, and it's only appropriate that we should actually quote for you the original passage from the Ishopanishad. So this starts with, I think, verse 4. As far as I remember. That's right. No, this is 3. Let's get to 4. Give me a minute. Yeah, this is it. Anejadekam manaso javiyo nainat deva apnuvan purvamarshat Tadhavatonyanatyeti tishtan tasmin apo matarishva dadhati. This is the 4th verse of the Ishopanishad. Anejat. Yeah? It's basically, ejati is to vibrate. Anejat is that which does not vibrate. That means that which does not move. Silent, still. Which means it's a transcendent reality that is being talked about, not caught within the fluctuations of the mind. Anejat ekam manaso javiyo. Because it does not vibrate, it is even faster than the mind. Yeah? So which means basically the mind, through its vibrations, through its fluctuations, through its capacities to think, to conceptualize, cannot grasp it. That's the transcendence of it that's being indicated here. Manaso javiyo. Javiyo means faster. Manas is mind. So, if you look at this phrase fairly carefully, you will see, this is exactly what has been freely translated by Swami Vivekananda. And, but this phrase, in it, captures a kind of a logical contradiction. But it delivers a certain content to us. One, it's still unejat. Yeah? So it does not move. On the other hand, It says, Manaso Javyo, it's faster than the mind. Yeah, so it's basically what is being thought of as the speed of the mind is how fast can you conceive of things that are way beyond here. That means the power of imagination which goes far distances in an instant. But even that speed of the mind is nothing or is slower than this capacity of consciousness, that reality. The reality is even faster. So on the one hand, it is completely still. On the other, it is faster than the fastest that we can conceive of. Here, the mind is being thought of as the fastest possible. What does it really mean? It basically says that our categorizations, here the logical contradiction, the juxtaposition is between stillness on the one hand and speed on the other. What is being pointed out here is that because it is the substratum of everything, it is still. It is with respect to this stillness that other things move and their motion can be detected. On the other hand, however fast or however subtle we may try to make our mind and however distant our mental habits or attributes may go, wherever they go, they find that in order for the mind to function, this conscious principle must be there. Without it, there is no thought. Therefore, it is the substance of the mind's speed, which means the speed of thought. It is also, at the same time, the still framework with respect to which the motion of the mind is detected. Which means it is at the same time something on which both these contradictory qualities, which means on the one hand complete stillness, on the other tremendous speed, can both be superimposed fairly faithfully. Which means these ideas of stillness and speed or fast or something being fast, these are both mental ideas, and in order to capture the essence of these ideas, you need the reflection of consciousness in both. Which means without the idea of this principle of knowledge, so the question that we should probably be asking ourselves at this stage is, what is the common generalization of these two things that we regard as opposites, namely speed on the one hand and its logical opposite, stillness? Are these not both concepts? And if they are both concepts, wherein do they get unified? So there is one statement by Sri Aurobindo, a friend of mine told me, that one of the characteristics of the Indian mind has been to reconcile opposites. And here, essentially, the logical opposites of speed on the one hand and stillness on the other, what this verse is asking us to do is to introspect, to see where deep in our psyche can we unify these two opposite qualities of the mind. Aneja dekam manaso javyo. And then he says this, Naina na enat deva apnuvan purva marshat. Yeah, so there were these deities that people conceive of, but these gods or these luminous beings are incapable of grasping it. Vivekananda in another place makes rather somewhat deprecating and funny comments about these gods sitting in their heavens. And he basically says, what do? They keep drinking nectar and they get rheumatism. Which means basically that these gods that were worshipped is not the point here. Yeah. So the gods are worshipped very often, traditionally, historically, very often out of fear. People did not know that there were natural causes behind the sun giving its light and heat, behind the rains coming down, etc., etc. So nature was worshipped. I mean, various aspects of nature were worshipped as gods. But these are products. So these are perceived by our consciousness, is the point that one is trying to make. And therefore, the deity of rain or sun or etc., etc., are not capable of catching hold of this consciousness which gives them the right to exist. Yeah, so it's our awareness, our faculty of knowledge, this universal principle of knowledge or consciousness in each one of us. This principle is what grants reality to even these deities, to even these natural forces qualified by our consciousness. That's the point that one is trying to make here. It's being stated in poetic terms, na enat deva apnuvan purvamarshat. Why? Because this is even logically or ontologically prior to the existence of natural forces. That's how we should be able to understand it, even in fairly rational terms. Tadhavato anyat atyeti tishtat tasmin apo matarishva dadhati. So it's essentially an elaboration of what we just now said. And then, so it's not just one mantra from the Ishopanishad that he has talked about. And he goes on, I mean, the next verse, which was actually something, we'll come back to Vivekananda's statement, but we'll just quote from the Upanishad again. Tadejati tat ejati, which means that vibrates again, and its logical opposite. Tat na ejati. Tadejati tad nejati. Tad dure, that's very far. Tad vantike, that's near. Yeah. See, what the Upanishad is doing here, it's basically again pitching logical opposites side by side so that the mind gets the idea that what we are seeking in all of this is something against the backdrop of which all pairs of opposites come up and have a reality. So therefore, it shakes or it vibrates, tad ejati, and it is still tat na ejati. It is far and it is near, which means this physical notion of movement gone does not mean that there is no movement. That's what is being stressed here. It means basically both movement and no movement, these dual pairs are pitched against each other, and one is seeking a substratum in our psychological existence where both these opposites come together. The notion of very far in distance and that of very close. Yeah? Tad dure, tad vantike. Tad antarasya sarvasya, tadu sarvasyasya bhakyataha. This is verse 5. Tad antarasya sarvasya, that is inside all and that is outside all. Tadu sarvasyasya bhakyataha. Again, logical opposites being pitched against each other in this very elevated poetry, so that we can actually try to introspect, to get a sense of what it is in our psyche, in the depths of our psyche, that allow us to even conceive of these logical opposites. Wherein do these logical opposites get unified? That unification is not going to be within a logical framework. What one is asking is, what is the principle of knowledge within us which gives rise to these logical opposites? What are the logical opposites? Stillness versus motion. On the one hand, far versus near. In distance, that means space and motion. And then inside and outside. And all of that is supposed to be thought of. So three opposite pairs have been talked about here. And what we are being asked to do is really introspect within ourselves to find what it is in our psyche, what is it in the depth of our being that gives rise to these realities that we call far versus near. What is it in us that gives rise to this sense of this is outside and this is inside? What is it in us that tells something is still versus something is in motion? And it is there in the faculty which makes up these differences, if we seek for the answer there. That faculty is not there outside. We can't catch hold of it externally. Why? Because it is it is a part and parcel of ourselves. It is the most essential part of our being. Without that, we would not have any awareness. So where is the root of our subjective awareness itself? That's the real reason. That's the real enquiry that is being encouraged. In a certain sense, what one is doing here is taking the human experience, the subjective human experience, not the object of experience, but the subjective human experience itself, as the raw data on which the light of enquiry, jigyasa, as we have talked about, is the desire for knowledge, fueled by this process of enquiry. So essentially, so this desire for truth fueling the process of enquiry. So this enquiry is basically asking, where is it in our psyche that these things get unified? The locus of unification. And that locus of unification, we give it a name. We call it Atman, we call it consciousness. Atman literally means that which is the essential part of it. That's all. So we are really seeking the essential locus of unification in us of all experience, of all logical opposites of this experience. So tadejati, tannejati, taddure, tadvantike, tadantarasya sarvasya, tadu sarvasyasya bahyataha. And in that paragraph, we'll come back to that paragraph which we'll quote again. And here is really a certain practice that is being advocated. See, this enquiry, it's not always that everybody has a sharp tool of an analytic mind available. However, there is something that almost all of us can do. And this is it. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmani eva anupashyati. Sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsate. When sarvani bhutani. Bhutani here does not mean any particular person or particular being. It means all that is. So bhu, to be, the verb to be. So that which has become. When all that has become, yastu sarvani bhutani, all that has become, atmani eva anupashyati, which means that the essence of all these things that we claim exist, and we understand that through this introspection that it is the essential part of their existence. When we say that this chair is, what we are really saying is that one is aware of this chair existing in front of. And therefore this awareness is what is granting existence to this chair. This awareness, this knowledge is the same as existence itself without the limiting qualification of a particular, namely this chair. So, yastu sarvani bhutani. So, bhutani, one of these things that has come into being is the chair. So when instead of saying that there is this object called the chair, when we start becoming more inner oriented and say, look, it's not the chair that we are talking about. What we are talking about is this awareness of the chair, and this awareness is this deepest point of our psyche itself, and that needs to be caught hold of. Not this particular chair, not this particular camera, not this particular laptop, but the awareness of the chair, the awareness of the camera, the awareness of the laptop. What is common to all of this is this faculty of awareness itself. Can we catch hold of that faculty? And then all of this stuff gets unified. Yeah? One sees all these things unified in awareness of this, awareness of that, awareness of something else. The common feature being this faculty of awareness which unifies all of them. What's the practical output? And sarva bhuteshu cha atmanam. And in everything we see that awareness of that thing. Yeah? So it's this, in this awareness, in this consciousness itself, that these multifarious divisions need to get resolved. And what happens? When that unity is found, not just as, again, not just as something that we think about and ratiocinate about, but as something that is a felt reality that we can actually carry out in practice, what happens? Tato na vijugupsate. The desire to protect or hide oneself vanishes. What is basically being hinted at, and again Vivekananda was very fond of saying this, that the Upanishads talk of one thing above everything else. It is this freedom from fear. This fear comes when there's a notion of a second which limits me. But as soon as one becomes aware that the essence of what we talk about as a second is no different from the essence of my own being, then in essence there is no second to be thought about. This fundamental, universal fact, common to all our existences, is the real foundation for all ethical considerations. Without this this experienced fact of unity, no amount of policing, no amount of ethical moralizing will have any foundation, or for that matter, any effect. Which is why we need all these various social constructs of policing, catch hold of thieves, catch hold of this and that, etc., etc. That is just some kind of a temporary construct. It cannot provide a solution. On the other hand, once a certain sense of unity with all, with the second, with anything that we used to consider as different from ourselves, once that sense of differentiation is whittled down, is replaced by a sense of unification of the second and oneself in a common reality, what happens? The root cause of fear, which is this fear of the second, vanishes. There is no second to be afraid of. There is no second in any essential sense. That is what is being stressed. And once that is done, then fear vanishes. Therefore, what exactly is fear after all? It is something that is going to limit my experience, or it's going to take away something that I value. But that which is truly valuable is the same thing that is of value in what we call another. Once this is understood, we equally well understand that that which is of value to me can never be taken away from me. And so, fear vanishes. So we'll return to this next time, but these three verses that we've just now read out from the Ishwar Parishad has been summarized in English by Vivekananda. We've read it once, and we'll close today's discussion by reading that paragraph one more time. He is the one who vibrates more quickly than the mind, tadejati tannejati, who attains to more speed than mind can ever do, whom even the gods reach not, nainat deva apnuyat purvamarshat, nor thought grasps. He moving, everything moves. In him all exists. He is moving, tadejati, he is also immovable, tat na ejati. He is near and he is far, tad dure tad vantike. He is inside everything, tadu antarasya sarvasya. He is outside everything, tadu sarvasyasya bhakyataha, interpenetrating everything. Whoever sees in every being that same Atman, that was what we sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tatono vijugupsate. That's being translated here. Whoever sees in every being that same Atman, and whoever sees everything in that Atman, he never goes far from that Atman. When all life and the whole universe are seen in this Atman, then alone man has attained the secret. Tadu na vijugupsate. There is no more delusion for him. Where is any more misery for him who sees this oneness in the universe? So we'll stop. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.